All these guys in for the long haul, man.
Hello there, very good evening and welcome to tonight's program, uh, Government in Transition. I'm your host, Eddy Layne, and I have with me in the studio, well, via Zoom, I keep saying in the studio, via Zoom this evening, Anil Nandlall, former Attorney General, and of course, he is a candidate of the People's Progressive Party Civic. Also, we're joined by Hugh Todd, candidate of the PPC in the last elections. Gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the program.
Good evening, Ed. Hi, Anil.
Good evening, Todd. Good evening, Eddy. And good evening to your viewers. And thank you for inviting me to be part of your discussion.
All right, Anil. Tonight probably is an exciting 1 hour or so we have here to talk about developments over the past 24 hours or so. As most people are aware, the Chief Elections Officer, as is required by law, presented his report to the commission, to the chair of the commission, and I understand that has been distributed to members of the commission or commissioners regarding the March 2nd general and regional elections, more particularly with regards to the outcome of the recount. I know we have seen a number of views with regards to what Mr. Lowenfield has presented. I'm going to give you a chance to maybe to talk a little bit about his role, really, and whether or not his report really fits in to what he is required by law to do.
Now, thank you very much, Eddy. And perhaps a convenient place to begin is to recognize Lowenfield's antecedent in this whole electoral process, even ante the election itself. Lowenfield was always suspected by us and demonstrated to us, and by extension to the public, that he was always in conspiracy with the APNU AFC. I can cite about 1 million instances where he was carrying out at the level of the commission and the secretariat the political agenda of APNU AFC. At the stage of the house-to-house registration, he was doing exactly that. At the stage where he tried to deny the PPP adequate polling stations just days before the elections, and we had to intervene and go on the ground and make a whole lot of noise to get polling stations on the East Coast. His hand was found in that. Then, of course, you had the case where when the recount, when Mingo committed his fraud, Lowenfield never intervened, though called upon at Ashman's building to do so. Lowenfield aided and abetted Mingo in the commission of the fraud. And even after the fraud was committed, Lowenfield found nothing wrong with what Mingo did. Even the commission unanimously accepted that they cannot act upon Mingo's report. Nevertheless, Lowenfield had no problem whatsoever with those reports, with those declarations, and prepared a report based upon the fraudulent declaration, which is still on GCOM's website, and presented that report to the commission. Fortunately, the commission itself saw Mingo's fraud and decided to do a recount instead. When they were crafting the terms of the order for the recount, you would recall Lowenfield's infamous presentation in which he called for 256 days for that recount to be done. Then he gave a proposal. He was instructed to prepare an order capturing the procedure in relation to how the recount must be done. And you will recall that he presented a paper essentially prepared by Vincent Alexander, the APNU AFC commissioner, in which he was arguing for not a recount to be done, but an audit to be done. And we had to fight that down every day at the commission level. And of course, when the recount started, he was part of that secretariat that tried their best to undermine the recount. Remember the fumigation of the convention center and everything else that happened even while the recount was taking place. So Lowenfield has played the part consistently of being an agent of APNU AFC. So we have to get that clear and put that into perspective, his historical role, which culminated in this perversity that he committed. Now, I personally spoke with Keith Lowenfield and said to him that you know what this report requires of you, a mathematical function whereby you are required to add up the total votes for the 10 regions, aggregate them and tabulate them. And that's one. And on the other hand, you are required to do a summary of the observation reports, the various observation reports. I explained to him, I did that in the presence of Zulfikar Mustafa. I said, Mr. Lowenfield, please consult the Oxford Dictionary and make sure you understand the word summary, because I knew that Lowenfield was going to do wickedness. I said, you're only to précis, you're only to brief those observation reports. In other words, simply to summarize and brief the substance of those reports. You have no room, you have no authority, you have no power to inject into that report a personal view, a judgment of any type, or an opinion of any sort. It simply does not give you the room to do so. And for the avoidance of doubt, let me read the relevant portions of the order. The matrices for the recount of the 10 electoral district shall be tabulated. Tabulated means aggregated, add up by the chief elections officer and be submitted in a report, together with a summary of the observation report of each district to the commission on or before the 13th day of June 2020. Lowenfield, in complete and most blatant violation of the letter and spirit of this mandate, narrow mandate, arrogated unto himself a great plenitude of power to incorporate into the observation report a whole host of things which he was not empowered to do. And worse yet, he proceeded to do some tabulations based upon his opinions. And he then went on to purportedly to investigate and make a findings on what he calls evidence and make some damning conclusions, invalidating some 275,000 votes, and something that neither he has nor the commission itself has the power to do. The commission powers are explained in Article 162 of the Constitution. This is the commission. The commission is far more powerful than Lowenfield. If the commission doesn't have the power, moreover, Lowenfield doesn't have the power. Article 162 sets out the functions of the election commission. It says they shall have all the functions connected with or relating to the registration of electors and the conduct of elections. That is one. Two, they shall exercise general direction and supervision over the registration of electors and the administrative conduct of all elections of members of the National Assembly. So they must manage and conduct the elections. Two, they shall issue such instructions and take such actions as appear necessary and expedient to ensure impartiality, fairness, and compliance with the provisions of this Constitution or any other act. That's all. In everything that I've said there, as broad as those powers are, you didn't hear the word investigate. You didn't hear the word hear and determine any complaints of any type. The reason why is because the very next provision of the Constitution, so as not to leave the reader in doubt, the very next provision of the Constitution invests in the High Court an exclusive jurisdiction. And I emphasize the word exclusive. Exclusive means to the exclusion of GCOM, the Chief Elections Officer, and every other agency on planet Earth. Exclusive jurisdiction in the High Court to hear and determine either generally or in a particular place whether an election has been lawfully conducted or the result thereof has been or may have been affected by any unlawful acts or omission. Those things that Lowenfield took into account are matters that are for the High Court. But let us assume, Eddie, for the purpose of argument, that GCOM had the power or Lowenfield had the power. Every power in law must be exercised reasonably, fairly, and in accordance with established principles of law. One of the fundamental principles of the rule of law is natural justice. The right to vote is a legal right. Claudette Singh, High Court judge as she then was, in Esther Pereira, elevated it to a constitutional right, a most cherished and sacrosanct right in a democratic society. And Claudette, and it's a fundamental tenet of natural justice that you can't take away a person's right without affording them a hearing. And what does a hearing mean in law? It means that a man is free to be represented by a lawyer. Also, he has to be given the evidence that is against him. He also must be allowed an opportunity to test that evidence by cross-examination and otherwise. And he also must be allowed to lead evidence on his behalf to rebut the evidence that seeks to impugn him. When did Lowenfield did any of these things? He wants to invalidate the ballots of 275,000 people or thereabouts without not offering a single one of them a hearing or the political party to which they belong or they have voted for. It can't happen. Never can happen. And what Lowenfield has done, he has made Mingo look like the Pope. He has made Mingo look like the Pope because he has committed a greater fraud than Mingo. He took everything that APNU, AFC leaders used to say under that tent in front of the convention center. He took those things seriously. So Aubrey Norton used to go there and say that if a poll book is not in a ballot box, then the entire ballot box votes must be thrown out of the window as being fraudulent. And then Harmon would come the next day and say tens of thousands of dead people voted. And none of them ever connected any of those allegations to a ballot in the ballot box. How dead people can vote is, I don't know. But which vote in the ballot box belonged to a dead man? And then, of course, the populace is aware of the hundreds of or dozens of people that we have found who they claim were dead or are dead. And we have been able to get those people to speak, to show where they voted and that they voted. And so what Lowenfield did, and what he's calling evidence, is these fanciful and fraudulent allegations that these wild and reckless agents of APNU made in the counting stations, and suddenly these allegations are elevated to the form of evidence and proof, and Lowenfield accepts them. Absolutely ultra vires, and he has no power to do any of the things that he purported to do. And then, of course, his numbers. He has rigged more for the PNC or the APNUFC than the APNUFC asked him to rig. Because the AFC, APNU were contending that they wanted to invalidate some 254 ballots. Lowenfield, so willing to please his masters at Congress Place, proceeded to invalidate some 275,000. He gave them another 25,000. And at the end of this process, when the dust is settled, Lowenfield will have to answer. And we will have to know what is it that Lowenfield has been given or promised to commit a fraud of such colossal proportion. So, in summing up this aspect of the program, Eddy, I want to say to you that Lowenfield has acted completely outside of the scope of his powers. And the only good thing that Lowenfield has done, he has actually tabulated the recount numbers of the votes or the numbers generated by the recount, both nationally and regionally, on 2 separate sheets of paper. And those are the only 2 sheets of paper, and perhaps the part of his report that actually summarizes the observation reports. But even then, I'm told, and we have people who are going through them one by one, I have been informed by our party comrades doing the work that when they look at the observation reports, Lowenfield has put in more allegations than what are in the report. This guy went to town on every aspect of the matter. So he fabricated, concocted, and conjured up allegations that were not even made. This man is a manifestation of perversity in its purest form. So GCOM is enjoined, is bound to disregard what Lowenfield has done and to direct him to prepare only the tabulations that he done in relation to the votes for the national election and regional elections, and reduce that to the forms pursuant to Section 96 of the Representation of the People Act, which is a form that you just got to inject the figures and it gives you the number of votes and the allocation of seats. GCOM cannot act upon the papers that Lowenfield has presented.
Anil, I'll bring in you here. I have a question on what you said. But you have listened to from a legal perspective. Your thoughts quickly. I'll come back to you, Anil, because I have a question on what you would have said, Justin, but I'm going to bring in you quickly.
Well, basically, when you look at what emanated out of the document that Lowenfield provided, one can see that he was actually wearing 2 hats. He wore the hat of the chief elections officer to produce the correct numbers of the recount, and then he wore a political hat bearing the full brand of the APNU AFC to produce numbers like a politician. That is a political submission that he made. It had nothing to do with any technical aspects that were part of his remit. He went way beyond. He became a politician. So he has 2 offices, obviously, that he's operating from. He's operating from an office within GCOM, and clearly one might want to assume that he has an office at Congress Place, because for him alone to sit down and put together that summary, clearly that would have had input from some elements within Congress Place, because it was too juicy to give them the position to come out and start to champion his document even before the ink was dried. They started to run with it as if, look, the chief elections officer, he is the one who we should depend on. He is the one who will change all of the narratives coming out of the international community, the PPP, the other contesting parties, all of the national organizations. They are using this one man who we knew all along was colluding with the APNU AFC to use that as justification. And I might dare say that this is how dictators operate. David Granger is only interested in any result that favors him being in office. That is why he would cling to that. Anil debunked it in many ways, using the law. But that is what Lowenfield did. He was operating as a politician on one hand. On the other hand, he did what he was supposed to do in producing the numbers based on the aggregate tabulation. So this is what you have. You have a dichotomy here. A man who wants to be a politician and a technical officer to represent the people. And he is doing a disservice to the people of Guyana. He is doing a disservice. He should be paying back all of the money he's to receive in salary and benefits to the people of this country. They are putting, he and along with the apnea of sea, they're putting the people through this country to a lot of emotional stress. The social cost is heavy and they don't care. They do not care. 100 days plus so far. And they're still operating as if we have a long way to go. No, we don't. The law is clear.
Anil, I want to take you back. You made mention of Lowenfield. I would really like for you to, I don't know if you can, to explain to me how exactly. So APNU came up and say, in ballot box 4120, 15 people or 30 people whose names were ticked were out of the country or died. How did Lowenfield sat down to determine who those 30 persons voted for? How do you take away these votes? Whether you take it from the PPP or you take it from APNU or ANOG or TCI, that is where I'm stuck since yesterday.
Lowenfield, because the allegations came from APNU, Lowenfield deducted the votes from PPP.
Oh my God.
You understand? Although on many occasions, APNU objected to people who voted for them.
Yes,
exactly.
yes,
You would
yes,
recall
yes.
the couple from East Bank, Berbice, who were featured in an article in Kaichur News. They said that those people migrated, and the people said not only were they in Guyana and voted, but they voted for APNU.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So those two votes, they took from the PPP. And also, if let us say they allege that two dead persons voted and the votes are in a particular ballot box, and the ballot box got 400 votes that are not questioned, because that two votes are in that ballot box, the entire 400 is thrown out of the window.
Yes.
So that is how he reached that huge exaggerated number of 270-something thousand. That is it. Imagine when Lowenfield tabulated, APNU won Berbice, APNU won Port Morant, Quarantine, the stronghold of the PPP. APNU won Monrepo and Nandlall and Mr. APNU won West Coast, Demerara, very many other places. PPP, heartlands. So this guy, the APNU shouldn't be proud of what Lowenfield did. Lowenfield was callous, he was reckless, he was unsophisticated, and he was vulgar. It's hard to defend. That is why you're not hearing anybody defending Lowenfield, other than holding on to the report and saying that he has the power to do that. None of them have so far attempted to defend what he has done in a meritorious way, step by step or issue by issue. They can't, because it is simply indefensible. It is indefensible. And what Lowenfield has also done is that over 20,000 or about 20,000 persons worked within GCOM itself on elections day. And then you had another several thousands working as polling agents for all the parties. Lowenfield has put all those people in a basket and dumped them middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And has also implicated the entire commission.
Yeah.
Because Lowenfield has found as judge, jury, investigator, and enforcer, you thought Lowenfield wearing 2 caps. Comrade, you don't start to count caps yet. This man got caps more than the vendors arcade.
He's a pimp.
This man got many, many caps. He's judge, he's jury, he's executioner, he's investigator, all in one. And in this multifarious role that he plays, and this he's like an octopus with many hands. And in his discharge, in his report, he has thrown the entire commission under the bus as well, because he has indicted them.
Yeah.
And this is not a rich country. 8 billion. Now, people call figures and they don't appreciate what 8 billion is. $8 billion were spent. Do you know how much computers and schools $8 billion can build for our children? How much computers it can buy? How much pharmaceuticals, medicine can be bought for our sick people with $8 billion? And Lowenfield, the chief elections officer, receiving a huge salary with a whole host of benefits, and a commission being paid handsomely to run this election, and all the money they have spent, $8 billion have gone down the drain. And Lowenfield says they have produced an election that is incredible. When public office holders commit such acts, which Lowenfield has conceded or confessed to, it is misfeasance and malfeasance in public office. And people don't only go to jail, but they are surcharged for the wastage of public funds. So this report has far-reaching ramifications, not only for Lowenfield, but for the entire commission. Because at some point in time, those in the commission will be held responsible.
Elections day staff as well.
If they condone Lowenfield's posture. Because if they condone Lowenfield's posture, then they are admitting as well that they have plundered and squandered $8 billion, for which there must be some legal recourse. Must be. In no part of the world can public officers squander $8 billion or its equivalent and not face consequences. So the commission, out of necessity, in my humble view, must distance itself from Lowenfield's report. Must do so. Is obliged to do so unless it is prepared to face the consequences that Lowenfield has exposed them to, the liability and the culpability and the legal dangers that Lowenfield has exposed everyone to. So this matter has deep and far-reaching ramifications. And that is why it is expected that the commission will simply discharge the oath of office that each commissioner took, including the chairman, which is to discharge their duty and their mandate without fear or favor and in accordance with the Constitution and the laws of Guyana. And the Constitution and the laws compel them to declare the results of the elections based upon the recount of the ballots.
Yeah.
Whoever has a problem with that, there's a recourse. It's not that you are without recourse. The law in its majesty provides a recourse, and it is to go to the High Court by way of an elections petition and ventilate your grievance. And I want to also add quickly, as I have been doing all the time, that Guyana is not peculiar or unique in this respect. This is the position which obtains throughout the Commonwealth.
Anil, you spoke about the fact that Lowenfield is required to prepare a final report that is to be sent to the commission. What if he refuses to do so?
Well, if Lowenfield refuses to discharge his statutory function, then he has a deputy. She can be directed, Roxanne Myers. The problem is that she may be even more perverse than Lowenfield.
Yeah.
Now, the law in its wisdom, both Section 22 of the Election Laws Amendment Act, as well as Article 162 of the Constitution, provides GCOM with sufficient powers to make the declaration itself.
Okay.
Right? Section 22 says this: if any difficulty arises in connection with the application of this act, the Representation of the People's Act, the National Registration Act, etc., etc., the Commission shall, by order, make any provision, including the amendment that appears to the Commission to be necessary or expedient for removing difficulty. So by an order, the Commission can give itself the power that Lowenfield has. And any such order may modify the said legislation, etc., etc. So they can modify the ROPA to take the power away from, not to take the power away from Lowenfield, but to give themselves the power to declare the results if a difficulty arises. And then Article 162 says that GCOM has the power to issue such directions and take such actions as appear necessary or expedient to ensure fairness and impartiality. So both under the Constitution and under the Election Laws Amendment Act, the Commission itself has an umbrella of powers to perform the functions of the Chief Elections Officer should the occasion arises to necessitate that eventuality. So, and I keep saying that there is no greater institution than the law. And the law has provided in its wisdom, in its majesty, a remedy or a recourse for almost every eventuality possible. You just have to read the law in the manner in which it should be read. You know, give it an interpretation that is liberal rather than restrictive to address the particular situation at hand.
Anil, let us talk about Article 177B, 2B, 177 2B, because I want for us to establish the relationship between the role of GCOM with regards to declaration and the position, the current status of the presidency. It states clearly that, if I can go it in my own terms, basically that the presidential candidate of the list with the most votes is deemed the president. Shall be deemed, and I understand in law, shall essentially means must be deemed. And it also says that GCOM is so directed to declare that person the president. Let's talk about that article.
Now, Eddie, this article was introduced along with the introduction of the executive presidency in the year 1980. And it was retained when we reformed the Constitution. This article and this linguistic device of shall be deemed was put there specifically, so that there is no break in nexus and there is no interregnum to allow any wickedness to take place when it comes to the election of the president. And this is the product of Burnham, Shahabuddin, and Ramphal, because they recognize the possibility that someone may try, between the declaration of the results and the swearing in, someone may try to stop a president from being sworn in. And deliberately and intentionally to defeat that danger, this linguistic formulation was utilized. And that is why it says deemed means automaticity. You automatically become the president from the moment the votes are tabulated. Now, of course, it says here that you must await the advice of the chief elections officer. But that must be read in the context of an ordinary elections, when only the chief elections officer would normally have the tabulated totals coming from the returning officers of the various regions. But in this situation, when there is a national recount, which was publicly done, and the tabulation of that recount was publicly done, and the totals are known and are public information, the presidency is deemed to have evolved onto Irfan Ali. And he is deemed to have been elected the president. Not to miniaturize the role of GCOM, the truth is that what the declaration will do will simply solemnize and formalize Irfan Ali as the president. That is all that it will do. I take you back to 1997, when Comrade Jana Jagan was declared the president after the votes after the 1997 elections. Aubrey Norton approached the court and attempted to get certain orders to prevent the swearing in of Comrade Jana Jagan. And Justice Desiree Bernard, when they tried to serve the order on Comrade Jana Jagan, she threw it over her shoulder, an act that she apologized for. But the truth of the matter is that she could not have been served with legal process because she was already deemed the president. When Gokul Bodu, the chief elections officer at the time, handed the results to the then chairman of the Elections Commission, Mr. Dudnath Singh, who declared the results, Ms. Jana Jagan was already the president. And in that very case, Chief Justice Bernard interpreted this article and dismissed Aubrey Norton's challenge on the basis that Jana Jagan was already the president and you couldn't prevent her from swearing in because she is deemed to be the president. And that will be the subject of my next article. Tomorrow, I will work in getting that out public. So this thing was deliberately crafted to meet the kind of situation with which we are confronted here now. So for all intent and purposes, Irfan Ali is already the president of Guyana. And it's just a solemn, formal, and act that have to be performed, or actions which have to be performed, that will take us, formalize it.
You.
Hi, Ed. I'm here.
Yeah. So Anil, let us move to. First, let me get you in here, Hugh, because you've been on the ground too. You've been talking to people and listening to some of the comments. So there seems to be some confusion on the ground, and this is a confusion, Anil, that has been fueled by the APNU AFC through their propaganda, somehow to give the impression that this, whoever is going to be or is the president, is only determined when the chair makes that final declaration, totally trying to ignore the numbers that are already out there. Hugh, I'm going to bring you in quickly before we go back to Anil.
Yes, I think what has been happening over the last several weeks of this recount process was that the president, along with the rest of the cabal at the APNO AFC outfit, they were trying to give people the impression that the only person that can make the pronouncement on the outcome of this recount process is the chair. And that is because the president went to the convention center weeks ago, and he said that he's going to accept any decision coming out of the chair. But if you listen to the messages coming out from him, he's really basically instructing her. He is basically intimidating the chair by giving her subtle directions. He is trying to direct the chair to provide a result that will keep him in office and his government in place. That is what he's doing, and he's feeding that to the base, because remember, a lot of persons within the base may only listen to what comes out of the APNO AFC. So what he's doing is trying to keep his base together. Don't worry. Every time we win a mile, they will continue to shift the goalposts. And that is what they've been doing. So they've been shifting the goalposts all along. Every defeat that they've encountered, they will continue to shift the goalposts. If you listen to the president today, he said that, you know what, I really wanted this recount because I recognized it was fraud early on. So he is talking about all that Mingo would have done and put in his report. These are the things that we actually were worried about. And look, it's in the report. So the chair would have to make the right decision, ignoring the fact that Mingo is the one that led to this, to the recount process, and all of the support that the process got from the international community and our traditional partners. He's ignoring all of that because, remember, he wants a decision that will only be suitable to him and his outfit. Nothing else would matter to him. So that is why he's giving those signals. That is why he's continuously, over the last few days, he's coming out to his constituency, trying to ramp them up, trying to get them going, because he has to confront now. If you notice what happened in the Caribbean community, they called him out. They said, listen, you're the leader. You need to speak to the rest of the world and to the people of this country. So he is coming out and he's trying to ramp it up in a major way. He's trying to show that he's strong, that he's bold, and that he's confident. But I think he's very scared. I think he knows that the writing is on the wall, and he's just hoping. He's just hoping by some means, some good luck will flow in their favor, and the GCOM chair will pronounce in their direction. But that's not going to happen. Anil already outlined all of the processes that need to be undertaken and how the system works. There's nothing there for him and his cabal. There's absolutely nothing there for them. So they're working now on these mind games, intimidation. It's not going to work. The GCOM chair is robust. She's tried and tested. She understands Guyana. She understands the politics, and she knows what she has to do. Lowenfield as trying to give them an extra little bit of fuel to see if they can finish nicely. It's not going to happen. Lowenfield has put himself in a position where he really could not have hidden from the spotlight anymore. Everyone who is involved will have to present themselves. They can't hide anymore. Crunch time. And their masters will call them out and say, listen, you're in this with us. This ship going down, you will go down with it. So no one can escape this. So if you were part of this, corrupt plot, you will have to come out and show your face, because they're not going to go down alone. They're going to use their agents and they're going to throw them under the bus. So Lowenfield is going to be kicked aside soon. You look and see. Soon as this is over and we get to dealing with the legal issues, you'll see how fast the politicians will kick them aside.
Anil, I want to bring you back in here, and I want us to talk about that letter by Basil Williams, the former Attorney General, or the outgoing Attorney General, trying to say that GCOM cannot declare a win in these elections, essentially saying that the elections should be scrapped.
All right, but I need to revisit something that Todd talked about. It is a fundamental legal truth that it is the GCOM that is the authorized agency by the Constitution to declare the results. So we have to accept that reality. However, GCOM can't declare a result that is different from the ballots counted. If that is the position, then it makes no sense you have elections and people vote. If you can have a commission or a chief election officer who can have the power to declare numbers that are different from the votes cast, then it makes the whole apparatus of election becomes a waste of time.
Yes.
Because one person or a grouping of people, 2 or 3 of them, can conspire together and take the votes of everybody and throw it in the Atlantic Ocean and declare whom they wish as the president. The law is not an ass. The law will never countenance. So when they're speaking about Article 177, and they're saying that the chairman can only act upon Lowenfield's advice only, that is true. Lowenfield advice can only be based upon the recount numbers. And GCOM can only declare the recount numbers. So there's no great magic in the language. I see they're sending around voice notes that, stay focused, and this man, Lowenfield is the man, and he has already made his report, and they are bound to accept his report. Absolute trash. His report has to be mathematically accurate, reflecting the recount numbers, and that is the report that he must submit to GCOM, and GCOM is bound in law only to declare that. So there's no latitude anywhere given, either to Lowenfield or to GCOM, to depart in any form or fashion from the numbers produced by the recount. So I want to make that very clear. Basil Williams, my friend, is well known by the public by now to have a very strange and unique understanding of the law. Basil Williams seemed to never understand when to use and when not to use an elections petition. When they were doing the no confidence motion case, he went by a fixed date application to challenge Sharon Das's dual citizenship, when he should have gone by an elections petition. That is one of the grounds upon which we won the case. When I filed a case against GCOM chairman, he argued that I should come by an election petition. The judge overruled him. When I filed a case challenging the house-to-house registration, he argued that I should come by an election petition. The judge overruled him again. When I did the case challenging Keith Scott and Felix, their election to the parliament to sit as technocratic ministers. Basil again argues that I should come by election petition. Again, he lost. So this guy, over the past 5 years, if you check the legal arguments in the court, he never understands when an election petition should be filed and when you can come to the court by another process. So that is what he wrote today, right? Because had he understood the law, he would have known that the very irregularities that he wants GCOM to investigate, and he says GCOM has the power to conclude and make findings on, are matters for the court to be brought by an elections petition. The man quotes a Malawi case and refuses to disclose to his readers that in that case, the GCOM of that country, the Elections Commission of that country, actually has an express power, a quasi-judicial power, to hear and determine allegations of irregularity. The GCOM in that country has the power under law. And anyone who is aggrieved by their ruling in relation to the allegations of impropriety, then you go to the High Court by way of a petition. Our GCOM has no such power. But Basil uses extracts from the judgment to fool the readers, thinking that nobody will go and check the case. That is the kind of foolishness that they do, thinking that Mingo could have pulled off this stunt, thinking that Lowenfield can pull off this stunt. And he cites a case where he doesn't explain the law in the country and says that that case is applicable to Guyana, where our legal system is radically different from that which obtains in Malawi. So I wrote an article today, it's out now, in which I've explained all of that, among other things. So we shouldn't take Basil Williams seriously. My article will put his argument to rest in a very elaborate way, and I've quoted authorities and so on to support my position.
I want to take you down the road, Anil, quickly to talk about Mr. Granger had an engagement with the press today. And I saw him mentioning issues like declaring state of emergency and maybe reconvening parliament because so that the government can access funds. Is this applicable after the elections?
Now, I agree with my brother Todd that Granger is using the press and using his influence as executive president to compromise and prejudice GCOM's deliberation. So we have seen Granger more in 48 hours than we have seen him in 5 years.
Yeah.
That is not a coincidence.
Yep.
That is Granger trying desperately to intimidate Planet Singh. And we want to call him out on that. He's trying to use the power and apparatus of the executive presidency, a position that he's squatting in, to intimidate, prejudice, and compromise GCOM, trying to project how GCOM should rule and how GCOM should go forward, only in his favor.
Yeah.
Today, he went a step further. He went a step further and he speaks about state of emergency and he speaks about reconvening parliament. These are complex legal concepts and mechanism that these guys are just calling glibly. They're just using it because, you know, somebody tell them about it. That is the problem. That's one of the problems in this country. Every Tom, Dick, Harilal, and Drupati believe that they can go and talk about complicated concepts of law and the Constitution. Parliament can only reconvene in certain circumstances. It can only reconvene after there's a new government. Parliament can't reconvene with an old government. Impossible. Secondly, so you have to have an election. We have had elections. It's the new government that has to reconvene Parliament, not Granger. Unless, of course, he's declared a new government, which is, as we said, cannot happen. Then a state of emergency. He doesn't have that power. You can't have a state of emergency between an election and the declaration of a result. Every rogue government, if that is possible, will invoke that special power once they recognize that they are likely to lose. And they throw the whole country in a state of emergency and continue to rule under presidential or executive edict. These guys that don't even say these things aloud. If you go in a room by yourself and you talk these things aloud and you hear them, you might realize how ridiculous they sound. These guys, they don't test this thing anyway. That's why one night under the tent, under the convention center with the journalists, I said before the AP and new AFC leaders come there and talk, they should practice the thing. They should practice, the cultural center when you're going to do a play. Or you got to practice, you got to rehearse, brother. You can't talk a zombie story just like that and expect to get it right. You got to talk it in a couple of more times, write it down, take notes, cram it, because you're lying. The same thing with these guys, with Granger. He's no different. Talking about concepts that he knows very little about and that are absolutely irrelevant and cannot happen, cannot legally take place. And I don't know, he doesn't get advice. I'm
Basil is his legal advisor.
Yes, he's the AG.
And this guy wants to emulate Fabs Burnham. Look, one thing you must admire Fabs Burnham for was his knowledge of the law. The man understood law. He understood the Constitution. In every other respect, he was a political demagogue. But the man was a bright, bright man. Granger is nowhere close to him. I'm trying to emulate Burnham and, absolute nonsense. So, Eddie, that's my take on Granger's utterances today. And we wrote something about it too.
All right. I think we're almost out of time. Hugh, I'm going to give you some closing comments and then over to you, Anil, to wrap the program up.
Well, Eddie, I think GCOM's work is clear. They just need to go to the recount. The numbers are clear. We've been waiting several weeks now for a result. We know what the result is. The entire world knows what the result is. So we expect that the commission will meet, they will deliberate, and that the GCOM chair will pronounce in accordance with the law, and a swearing in of Dr. Irfan Ali will happen shortly. I have no doubt that she will take control of that ship and make sure that the right thing is done.
Anil, your closing comments.
Well, I want to endorse the sentiments expressed by Comrade Hugh Todd. GCOM has no other option. It's as simple as that. They must declare the results produced by the recount. Lowenfield's aberration, fraud and perversity notwithstanding.
Yeah.
That must be tossed aside by GCOM, whether they do it by a vote, whether they do it by a vote or they do it unanimously. That must be rescinded. That must be overturned. Absolutely.
Yes, I agree. Totally.
The true results. Because what is the purpose of an election? The purpose of an election is to afford a nation an opportunity by virtue of ballots to select or elect a government of their choice.
Yes.
And the population has spoken through the ballots. The election laws all say that every other principle must bend and bow to the glory and power of a valid ballot. So once the ballot paper is authorized, is valid, the ballot is authorized, meaning it has a stamp. The mark of the elector is clear and close to a party of his choice. Then whether they have poll book, whether some returning officer commits an error, whether the poll book is entered wrong, whether whatever is the situation, that none of it can either individually or cumulatively affect the validity of a ballot cast. And the entire body of election laws are intended and designed to protect the ballot at all costs. Yes. And that ballot must be counted. Every other thing is secondary and subservient to that ballot that is valid. So we counted the ballots. Whether what was in the wrong container, what was in the wrong envelope, how the hell that can affect my vote? I put it there. I went to that polling station and I cast my ballot. You have a pack of incompetent people who can't put something in some envelope, who can't tick off some list properly, who can't put poll book in where it should be. And my vote was being validated. I mean, come on, it's common sense. The law is based upon logic and common sense. So Eddy Layne is a High Court judge and a Court of Appeal judge of years standing. Layne is the only living judge who has heard and determined an entire elections petition. She has rendered an erudite judgment, demonstrating her knowledge of elections law. I can only go on that and assume that Layne will discharge the functions of her office in the manner contemplated by the law and the Constitution. Because I know that she knows the right thing. We now have to wait to see whether it will be done.
Anil, I want to thank you very much for joining us tonight. You, Todd, thanks, John, for being part of this as well.
Pleasure, Ed.
I think tonight's discussions were very informative. You've clarified, Anil, most of the legal questions, I think, that are on the minds of a lot of people. I think the report by Lowenfield has thrown a lot of people into their minds into a lot of confusion. They were wondering, how they get out of this. So I think you've put to rest many of those misinformation, misconception, confusion in the minds of Guyanese who have been waiting patiently. And I think the patience of Guyanese are running thin as a result of this, this long drawn-out process that we're going through. Maybe by now we should have had Dr. Finali's government looking back at its first 100 days in office, rather than us waiting to get a result for this period. So Anil, again, I want to thank you for being that informative and to clarify all these issues. Hugh, thank you so much for being part of the program.
Last thing, Eddy, before you go, let me assure you and assure the people of Guyana that the Irfan Ali government will get back this every single day that is passed, that was wasted, that they were denied lawful government. They will get it back in the end.
Thank you so much, Anil. Thank you. And to our viewers, we want to say thank you
for the
program.
Thank you.
Fantastic Saturday evening until tomorrow evening. Sunday evening, sorry.
Sunday evening.
Until tomorrow evening, we want to say thanks for being part of the program and have a good rest of the evening. Gentlemen.
Take care, Eddy. Bye, Guyana.
Hi.
Take care.
Yes, we are off.
Take care.